Hi, welcome to Switching Mindsets. This is Anuradha, and I'm in conversation with disability activist Nidhi Goyal, who is the founder and executive director of the leading national award-winning non-profit organization Rising Flame. It has recently come out with the anthology And They Lived Ever After, where disabled women retell fairy tales. A disability, diversity, and inclusion specialist, Nidhi has advised, led, and steered numerous global and national organizations and initiatives. She's also India's first female disabled comedian and uses humor to challenge stereotypes around disability, gender, and sexuality. Hi, Nidhi.
Hi, it's such a pleasure speaking with you today here.
Yeah, and your bio was so long that I couldn't fit it in. You've done so much. So,
Thank
anyway,
you,
I'm so
Radha.
happy to have you on this.
The pleasure's all mine.
Yeah. So, I like the way you start your stand-up comic acts, It's so disarming. You say that, I'm blind, love's blind, let's get over it, right? And you say
Yes,
that with a smile, and that's just so awesome. So, tell me, I'm sure it wasn't easy getting there, but
it's
so
it's
it
a
start
very interesting
yeah,
question.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. Tell
Yes,
me.
please, Radha, go ahead.
So, I just want to know that, your till 15 you had perfect vision, right? And you wanted to be a portrait painter. And that's when the entire thing started, when you realized that, it was, you were slowly basically losing your vision. So let's start with that and how you come to today. You're so confident.
Right. Thank you so much. I think the start of the journey is the best place to start, but I do want to say I still have a perfect vision. I just don't have a sight, right?
Ah,
So
yes, absolutely.
it's it's very important for me because I think the vision, the power to dream, the ability to trust oneself, trust the world, and trust luck. All of this has led me to being where I am. So um, yes, I was non-disabled before. I wouldn't still say my sight was perfect because what is perfect, right? People are wearing spectacles. Do we call them perfectly sighted? But it was also very interesting because for about 10, 12 years of my childhood, I had dreamt and worked towards. So I was always about dreaming, but also working towards. This is something that my parents and family had ingrained that only dreams don't work. You have to work towards it. And I was working towards very diligently for 10 years of my childhood. To be a portrait painter. And I think when I was diagnosed, my biggest, it was not like, oh, what a life with blindness would be like. It was more like, oh, the brushes won't be my companions anymore. I'd have to find something else to do with my life, right? And what that else was when, for majority of my life, if I say if I was 15 and I was preparing for 10 years, it's really two-thirds of my life I'd spent dreaming about a career. So I think what was the most difficult was that. And then gradually, as I started losing sight, because I live with a progressive degenerative eye disorder, which can render you blind, and which it has to me, um, it was very interesting because, for me, it was like, okay, so today I can cross the street. Tomorrow I almost died crossing the street, right? So the fluidity, the uncertainness, the way to navigate the world when that uncertainness was going on, because you can probably in a certain light recognize someone, and then if it is dark you just couldn't recognize someone, and then people felt you were arrogant and egoistic. And how do you forge connections in that way? How do you find your space? How do you continue to be a quote unquote good student or a performing student? How do you flirt, or even like be a teenager? I think my biggest question was that how do you dream? How do you be a teenager? And some of these really perplexed me. And while I was grappling with this, my family really, really supported me. I have a spiritual guru, he guided me. And I think that is how I found my path ahead, or they created an ecosystem around me and mentored me and guided me that I could find my path ahead.
You're talking about your spiritual guru. What did that do for you?
So I am here because of my spiritual guru, Dr. Sri Guru Dr. Balaji Tambe. And what was very important is the minute you say spiritual guru, people roll their eyes. But I have, just the thing to say that what we call mentoring and guiding, and why do we recognize this kind of support that is really important for our growth, is the Guru Parampara. And that really brought home to me, he, in a very gentle way, he was the first person when I was really, really young, and I just young in my, losing sight or disability life. And he said, we have to start recognizing our privileges, but really not by using the word privilege, etc., but by encouraging me to look around me, encouraging me to say that there is a lot of path to be found, and you will be able to find once you start looking outside and not just what's happening to you. So moving away from just being self-centered, from asking the questions, why me, from really going out there, connecting with the community, understanding and recognizing privilege, and then dedicating your life to work towards, rather than sitting down and saying, why me? All of this he made me realize when I was 16. And that was when people ask me, where did Rising Queen start? I always say that that was a commitment. That's when I understood what he was telling me, was a commitment that I said to myself, I will do something. I didn't know at that point what that something would look like, take shape, but I knew that I would do something to change the situation for people who are not as privileged as I am.
That's fantastic. It's interesting because, instead of just forcing you to look inward, he asked you to look outward.
Yes.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Yeah. And I guess what you're saying about this why me, it probably at the age of 16, when we stop thinking like that, it's become a habit by now.
Happens. I think the why me comes back. We're all human beings. I think it comes back at different points, but you have learned early on in your life to sort of move away from that question, and that's where you learn to be empathetic, compassionate. Because the minute you locate yourself in a larger community, in a larger society, in a larger ecosystem, you start seeing like a lot of not just your own issues, but issues that are collective, concerns that are collective, etc.
Yeah, I suppose that's important, finding a community like in your book, which I'll come back to in more detail later. One of the writers you've written, she became progressively deaf, or I think she was born deaf, one of the writers, and she had never met a deaf person till her teens. So I guess having a community is quite important.
Absolutely. And that we learn as we grow, right? We learn about community, we learn about,
Absolutely.
what support systems look like. And we all talk about it. We learned that in COVID, we learn it in every crisis of our life, if not otherwise. But we definitely appreciate, recognize, and learn it in every crisis of our life. And, speaking of community, for me, it became as a teenager really interesting, because people are like, oh, how did you work? How did you come to this point that you're carrying a white cane and it's so easy, and you don't, there are many people who feel ashamed about if they have been non-disabled, or if they don't want to showcase the disability. That's what many a times assistive devices are looked at, like, by non-disabled folks, that you're showcasing your disability, right? That it becomes obvious to the world that you're disabled. You'll hear many elderly people also say that hearing aid hearing aid nahi lagana hai, right? That there is some shame, some hesitation attached, and people were like, but you very seamlessly, when you lost sight, it took me about 5-6 years to lose whatever sight I had, and I basically just got a cane and I started using. And they said, but why was it so comfortable? Why didn't you have hesitation? Like, how can you do this? Right? People, friends,
Yeah.
like many people were uncomfortable, and they were like, oh, you started using a cane. And I was like, yes, but why? I was like, because I'm blind. But these things were not uncomfortable, because for me, community was at home, right? A
Right.
favorable ecosystem was at home. So we're three siblings, and my eldest sibling, I'm the youngest, and my brother is the eldest, and he had gone blind by then. He was using a white cane, and I had a family who had adapted splendidly. They were like, oh, so he uses a white cane, he uses this is best because it gives him independence, right? There was a support system, there was no shame at home, and there was community at home. So I think for me, both those experiences of neither, my sibling, my sister, who's between the two of us, is completely non-disabled, and she never felt like an inch of like shame around, oh, because I've seen siblings, particularly around their friends, peers, and particularly when they're younger, feel very uncomfortable with their disabled siblings, right? Parents are uncomfortable saying, no, 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 my daughter has a little bit of problem. It's not, no, no, she's okay otherwise.
Yeah.
My parents were like, she's okay only, but she's blind. What is there? Right? So I think all of this, having this support and community, and we recognize it repeatedly in every situation of our life. Disability just makes it stand out as an experience. But I think in each of our experiences, this is crucial, critical, and absolutely necessary for survival and growth.
Yeah, the white key, like you said, it's a positive thing. It's
Yeah,
supporting you. It's helping
yeah,
you do things and helping you be independent. And talking about,
absolutely.
I remember again what I think I've been stalking you on social media and everywhere for the last few days. I could do this interview all by myself. So
Okay,
just
I'm now
repeating what you
worried.
said.
I want to really be here.
Yeah. So, like your parents, you said they were advised by the doctor that, oh, like quickly get you married by the time you turn 18 and don't tell the, whoever the prospective in-laws, that you're going to be blind. Huh?
Yeah,
I mean, how
it's
crazy
so
is that?
it's hilarious. I mean, looking back, it sounds hilarious, but I can only imagine the kind of pressure society would have put on them, right? It's also their strength, and this is something that I do want to say to everyone who have daughters, who have kids, who have anybody who you feel is different, right? Everybody out there can put pressure on you, and this is amazing because when we talk about stigma, very often, and I would like to say this, very often people jump and say, oh, those must be people who are not educated or like low resource settings or rural areas and all things like that. And I'm like, no, educated, upper class, upper caste, city based people think like this. It's only that we sometimes know political correctness, and so we start using the right words. We think like that. Stigma is extremely ingrained in each of us. Stigma around gender, stigma around disability, stigma around any difference. And it's interesting because I don't think the person who advised them would have ever given it a second thought, right? Other than judging me and saying now she's going to be a burden on her parents.
And maybe they felt
Uh,
they're being well-meaning, right?
yeah, but this is our point, right? That how do we place women in our families or girls in our families, and how do we place disabled people, and what's the worth that you place on this disabled woman? And this is something that I recognized early on, but also looked at so many women with disabilities struggling with this. So many women with disabilities whose identities have been denied. So many women with disabilities who've been made to feel like they're at the lowest rung of the social ladder, right? And lowest means absolutely lowest because their worth is even lower than disabled men. So my household or my family wasn't like that. But even the COVID studies that we did at Rising Flame, we have research that is showing it, right? Where even in low resource settings where there was one technological tool, the non-disabled child was prioritized to access the mobile for studies more than the disabled child. And if there were two disabled children, the male child was prioritized um, over the girl
Quite
child.
a detailed study. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very interesting because what does this disabled woman feel like? And it takes me back to one of the trainings that I was conducting early on in my career. This was pre-Rising Flame, and I was at a center where it was a center for young blind. They were doing rehabilitation courses, and it was teenagers, right? And their disability was blindness. And so I was conducting a training and talking about crushes and relationships because we were talking about sexual and reproductive health and rights. And it was so interesting because we always talk about sense of self. And the boys immediately said, and they were giggling because we made some like icebreaker, and I'm not remembering what icebreaker it was. And they were giggling. And I said, what happened? It's like, ma'am, ask him about things. And I was like, why does he have a girlfriend? So they giggled even harder, right? Um, and somebody whispered, yeah, and he gets 11 on 10. And I was like, why? He said, because he has a non disabled girlfriend.
Oh.
And I asked them, saying, okay, so what if he dated a blind girl? He's like, then it's just two or three because they are right here. And the blind girls were sitting next to them. They were their friends, they were their peers, they were people in the same course as them, right? And so, how we devalue women with disabilities or girls with disabilities at every stage in our conversations, in our behavior, in our action. This is something that really motivated me to come into this space and work at the intersection of disability and gender.
Yeah, and you've kind of touched upon it in your story as well in the book. Yeah, I don't want to give it away, but yeah, I mean, that's what it is. Like, it's, even the girl's friends in that story, it's just, I mean, shall I talk about it more? I don't know. So it's
You
just
can talk
that,
about it a bit. I mean,
yeah,
I can share that. It's not a problem, right? This girl is in
yeah,
love.
hmm,
And how the two friends react differently, right? One feels like she deserves love only of a disabled man, if at all. Uh, and, if, and still she should be grateful, right? And this is a
yeah,
very, very, very common, like, framing around women, I would say, who are at any kind of diversity. We've heard this conversation about short women, too tall women, dark women, fat women, definitely disabled women, right? And I think
yeah.
this is the kind of conversation of how much you are going for in the marriage market. It's so
Yeah, where the
interesting.
friend says this guy is perfect for you, and you
Yeah,
wonder why. Is it because, he's also visually challenged, That's the
yeah.
thing.
Yeah. So this is, I mean, really how much you're going for in the marriage market or the dating market is really the kind of conversation that we have with
Yeah, it's
girls who are at any,
across. It's not
yeah,
just restricted to
disability.
disability. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that's true. So, why comedy? It's great. I mean, you're very funny. It's very entertaining. And I can see that, you're making a difference just by getting up on stage. Okay, so that again reminds me what you said that, somebody was very inspired by the fact that you just walked up and sat in a chair and you went back and told your sister. I'll let you complete it because I don't want to do this interview by myself.
So it's very interesting because the minute I walk into a room, the first thing people shake my hand and say, "You're so inspiring." And I'm like, but I didn't say a single thing. I just said hello and probably tried to see where the chair is. And I was having this conversation with my sister, right? I understand the work is inspiring and I understand the human piece around, when we see someone who has challenges, visible challenges, we appreciate them, right? Or we
Yeah,
feel like
of
they've
course.
done so much. So I don't want to dismiss, I don't want to be a complete whatever and dismiss the human emotion. But I was talking to my sister and I was like, I just entered and they were like, "Oh, you're so inspiring." And she said, "Yeah, you're so inspiring. You could sit down on the chair by yourself." And we just laughed our heads off because it is really interesting the way people find me inspiring, right? I've been stopped at the
Yeah.
airport. And at this point, I was actually having an argument with someone on the phone. And somebody just walked across and in the middle of my conversation just started speaking to me and said, "Hello, madam. I just want to say you're so inspiring." And I'm like, for what? For arguing with someone in a public place over the phone loudly? Like, why? Why do you even think I'm inspiring, right? Because I'm standing at the airport by myself. Like, what? What is really inspiring you? And it's a deeper question. You can have people who've made a difference, people who have, achieved as inspirational, but our basic and the question that I largely raised, the basic issue is that um, we find disabled people inspiring with a little bit of superiority sometimes, right? Because it comes
Yeah.
across like, "Oh my God, thank God we're not them." Like, it comes from that. Like, and it also comes from a space saying, "Look at her, like she can do it. Why can't you?" No, sir, I can do many things which you may not be able to do, right? I
Of
don't want to
course.
sound arrogant, but this is how you're motivating others. Saying, if she can do it, you can. I'm like, no, if she can do it, it's not necessary that you can, because not everyone's the same. I can get up on a stage and have a set, but you probably cannot.
Yeah,
But that
exactly. With
doesn't
all my
show
sight and all, I mean, not be able to do that.
that that
Uh,
doesn't make me superior or inferior or vice versa, right? So it really, I think, using disabled people to create inspirations in our life by putting them down. What is the basic underlying thing, right? What is the basic underlying motive of us calling them inspirational is something that we I challenge, or many of us, people with disabilities, challenge that, right? So I think that's a bigger question, but it's being disabled. Coming back to your question of why comedy was being disabled is, the experiences that you gather are both annoying and hilarious, right? Because my sister, my friends, everybody's told me, saying, we walk with you and we have to be well dressed. And I'm like, what happened? They're like, everybody looks at you, then looks at us, then looks at you, then looks at us, and keeps staring back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And you don't care. But we're like, oh my God, why are you staring at us? We have to be well dressed all the time. And I'm like, I'm so sorry for you because I am okay. Let people look at me. I call it stardom for free. But it's really about, so you gather many such experiences. I was in an auto rickshaw in Mumbai, and there was a homeless kid who came, and it was a kid, right? And came and started touching my feet or leg or something, and said, um, "De do didi paisa." And I think I did something, or they saw my cane or something. They realized that I can't see. And then she said, "Ye kya degi?" And they went away. And I was laughing, and somebody who was with me was so furious because they were like, how do you perceive this? I'm like, what is different? Everybody perceives us as very like lower on the ladder, like being very, very underprivileged in all senses. It's okay. And I found that moment really hilarious. I didn't find it insulting.
It is
I
hilarious, yeah.
I think it's very interesting to start, and I think I have a genetic. I mean, I don't want to give due credit to my dad. I think finding humor in people's misconceptions, or I think that's what I did. So many people think I'm cracking jokes on myself, and I had to explain to quite a few people, saying I'm really not. The joke is not on me. It's on the people who have this kind of weird behavior, or ignorant behavior. Because honestly, Anuradha, after a point, ignorance stops becoming a valid excuse, right? So when ignorance, there's only so much that you can say, oh, we didn't know about it. So go learn, read.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
lots
The
of
joke
things.
is on us, absolutely.
Uh, but I do want to say one of my TEDx, right? After that, one of the men who probably was in the audience and came to me, and I'd cracked quite a few jokes, and you've seen in my TEDx also, keep cracking jokes.
Yes, yes.
And he came up to me and said, "Hey, madam, it was very nice, very nice." I said, "Thank you, sir," etc. And he said, "You are though very bold, huh? Very bold." And the minute I looked at him and I was like, this is not really a compliment, right? You're not really giving me a compliment. You're just trying to make a comment which sounds like a compliment. So, who do we expect to speak up as well, right? Do we
Yeah.
expect women to speak up? Do we expect disabled people to speak up? Do we expect them to find humor in the situation? I think what happens, like you said, when I get onto the stage, I am shattering many of these preconceived notions. As a woman, as a disabled person, as just someone who can find humor in difficult situations.
When you get up on stage, it's actually, you look very good, you speak very well. So how much of it is deliberate? Like you know the effect that you're having, and so I just want to know. And again, like I said, just let me know where my curiosity gets
No, no.
intrusive. Okay.
I
Yeah. So
I don't know the
yeah.
effect I'm having, Anuradha. That's
Sorry.
just me. I don't really know the effect that I'm having. I'm just going as myself. This is what I'm
Yeah,
trying
you're
to
going,
tell
yeah, so yeah, that's great because
you.
you
Going
like
as
dressing up. I
myself.
read that, even in your story you said that, you always like earrings, the person in the story liked
Yeah.
earrings and things like that. So is it
So we
you
brought
know,
a bit of ourselves in the story, right?
yeah.
And so I thought one of this should definitely be in the story. But I think for me, I've just been fond of dressing up. I think I was very, very, I was not a good dresser, right? And this is all credits go to my friends. And I think till I was in undergrad, like halfway through my undergrad, till halfway through my undergrad, I was absolutely what people like to term a tomboy, right? In my dressing. So I would love sports watches. So even if I was wearing a salwar kameez, I would wear a sports watch because I thought the sports watch was cool and, whatever to people if they like it or not. And something, my last year of my undergrad, my friends took me shopping and they were like, "Hey, hello." And I was like, "I'm too fat, I don't find good things like female things, what you're talking about, feminine things in my size." And they're like, "You've not looked enough, right?" And from there, I think before my third year, my transition started, and I loved it so much that I think I completely transformed. I don't think there was a single day where I didn't have a matching earring, a matching top, a matching footwear, or even like things like that. I really think it's the people feel like I'm either. So there are two two schools of thoughts. It's really hilarious because somebody always feels there will be a group of people who feel like there's someone to pick out my clothes and my accessories, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, you have help at home. Good, good, good." And I'm like, "Do you really think my domestic help is picking up my accessory?" They're like, "Oh, but you have such a lovely husband who helps you." I'm like, "You really think I'm getting up every day?" And we're like, "Oh, maybe what should I wear today? Can you just pull all of that out? And then these are the accessories." But this is what people think, right?
Yeah,
When I was
yeah.
not married, they thought my sister and my mom. I mean, of course, all of us have, we take things to our families and friends and say, which one's looking better? And, what do you think will match better with this? But that doesn't mean that they're in charge of my dressing up, right? Like it's their responsibility. What happens is that we dismiss a lot of these human experiences for disabled people because we start judging them. So I would go out shopping with my friends and they were like, "Your friends are in charge of your wardrobe." I'm like, "Yes, in the initial years, but I'm also in charge of their lives, right?" Like we give all of this permission to our close ones saying, "Oh, okay, you think this top looks shit. Okay, so I will not wear it." But you are my fashion stylist and we do this for others, right? I have been buying purses for people or whatever, right? So I
Hmm.
think we dismiss all of this saying, but they're taking care of you. I'm like, "No, we're just being friends." But
Very
your
true.
sister, I'm like, "But we're just being sisters. Please tell me." I was the happiest when, in between, um, we both come to the same size and we were exchanging clothes. And I was like, I feel like my sister experiences, oh, that is fulfilled. But it doesn't mean like I don't can't pick out my clothes and want to wear hers, right? I think we're dismissing all of this. So I get all of these questions about who picks out your clothes, and then who matches it for you. And I'm like, I travel a lot and I pack my suitcase probably in like half an hour, and then I spend another hour. Exactly not these timings, but like disproportionately high time picking out my accessories that would go with each outfit, right? And so all my backpacking happens in a certain time, and 2x or 3x of the time I invest in picking out my accessories or whatever else I think is fashionable at that point to do it. Every city I go to, if I get 15 minutes, and all my colleagues know this because they've been dragged around with me saying, "On the way to the airport, we finished the training. There's 15 minutes. I need to stop at this sari shop." And they're like, "Okay, so this is a gray and green combination, very pretty." And I'm like, "I don't want to wear green, right?" And so I have definite opinions. I have definite choices. And I do all of this. So I invest because it's something that I like doing, right? Neither because somebody is there to help me, nor because I want to make a statement. It's more because that's just me.
Yeah, that's just who you are. And I just realized while listening to you that, I'm asking you this question, but once you're all dressed up, you're not really looking at yourself, right? I mean, I'm also not, no? So it's just the feeling of, you're well dressed or the fabric or, how you feel, you feel confident, you feel good. So it's really that. I mean, you wear something and you forget about it. It's not like you're looking at yourself all day.
But you'll also find me in the worst clothes, right? Like it's only last 3 years that my base has shifted from Mumbai to Delhi NCR. But like in Mumbai, you'd find me hanging out at a coffee shop at 11:30 at night, and really my pajamas and the worst t-shirts because those are the most comfortable, right? They've been washed some 200 times.
Of course.
And so I really tell people it's who I am and what I like to do, rather than living up for an expectation because people think like I want to challenge another thing, and that's why I want to live up to this expectation, right? I think, but I want to say that people with disabilities don't have this luxury for many of them. And we were having a panel discussion just recently at the Purple Fest, which Rising Flame had organized as a key partner. And we had a panel on disabled entrepreneurs who'd really achieved a lot, right? But they also said that many a times we keep on achieving one milestone after the other to prove to the world. So we don't know if we are running because we wanted to run and run that marathon, or to prove to the world that, oh, in spite of our disability, we can also run, right? So many a times as a disabled person, you go into this loop saying, okay, because non-disabled folks are doing this, I must do this so that they recognize me as an equal person, right? For
Yeah.
me, for me, none of my, and I'm very fortunate because none of my life, no part of my life has worked this way that I've tried to prove a point to the non-disabled. I manage my house because I want to manage a house with my partner, right? I live independently because I love independence. I travel because I think it's crucial for my work. And I love networking, and people give me a lot of, like, my biggest boost of energy on the lowest days. If you put me in a room with 200 people, I'll be the most excited, right? I'll get a sugar. What people get after sugar or candy is the rush that I get with people. So I do all of this because I like doing, not because I want to prove a point to anybody, not because I'd like to. But many, many disabled people have to continuously prove a point, and that's why they take up continuous things. Many of them, I wouldn't say all, but many of them take it up for that reason.
Yeah, that's excellent. You're not seeking validation. And I guess a lot of it comes from you yourself, your family, and everything around you.
I
That's
absolutely want to say that if you have a supportive environment, right, an accepting and supportive environment, I think I want to even go back to a time when I was non-disabled, right? And I want to say this because, like, what a supportive environment can look like. My teachers always, my sister and I were in the same school, and she was really sincere. She's a doctor now, so of course she was very sincere and studious. And teachers would always come back to me and say, "Listen, like, look at your sister. Like, why can't you do better? Why can't you beat her?" And one year, my teachers were really hell bent, saying, "You have to beat her score." And I couldn't understand for the life of me. I was in grade 8 and I was like, why should I beat her score? And I came back home and I told my father, saying, or parents maybe at that time, because my father responded. I remember saying it to my father. I said, they're insisting I beat a score. I don't really want to. They're like, just go back and reply to them and say that I don't want to. There is no competition between us. I am me and she is her. But this is not what we hear many parents. This is not what we see as a supportive environment. So it's not just about disability, it's about being a child, being a girl. And the minute you have a supportive environment, an accepting environment, right? So acceptance is the first stage, but support is the second. It's more proactive. And when I say support, it's not like, hey, we think you should do this and you can do this. We'll help you do this. I think what support for me look like is, we will stand here and provide support and you figure out what you want to do. So this shift or this kind of support helps you take charge of your life, right? Helps
right.
you become, like, make your own choices, that you know that you have choices, that you can take decisions, that you can, um, it is, and you have to face, it teaches you responsibility because nobody is thrusting their choice on you. You don't have someone to blame, which often people do, right? And I was
Right.
always told, saying, you have to decide. You have to decide if you want to be happy or not. You have to decide if you can find an alternative or not. You have to choose if you want to do this or not, right? And I remember in my early 20s when I was handed over the house keys, right? My father was like, you want to do late nights? Here's the key. We are not going to stay up every night. And many people are aghast listening to this, saying, how can you give a key to your youngest and like a disabled daughter? And I remember my father saying then also that, we've taught you enough. And now, whatever you do, you know that it's your responsibility. And you need to learn that, because in life, you will have to learn that actions that you make will be your responsibility. There is no discount for being a woman, a disabled person, etc. There is no discount. It's just life. And each of us have to lead it. So I think, if you see my story's name also, it's your choice, it's really bad of me. I'm not remembering the full title, but choice is right there in the title, right? It's Cinderella's story, but it's really right there because I
Yeah,
really
it's
believe
still your
that
choice.
it's
That's
still
what
your
it says.
choice.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's really important because for me, that is crucial when you're a woman, when you're a disabled person, and more so when you're a woman with a disability.
Yeah, so Nidhi, I want to ask you another thing, like the first thing, unfortunately, that anybody notices about you, even including me, is like, oh, okay, she's blind, right? But for you, how conscious are you of it? Are you at all conscious of it on a daily basis or in your life? I mean, do you think about it? And does it really affect your day-to-day life? Like even,
Right.
plugging into the laptop today to talk to me or anything, traveling or whatever, picking out your clothes, like you said. Are you conscious of it?
So, this is a very interesting question, right? Because I don't want to be a super motivational person and say, "Arey, kuch nahi hota hai."
Absolutely, yeah.
I
Toxic
think it's a lie.
positivity.
When anybody says, "Arey, kuch nahi hota," I think it's like, "हाँ, ठीक है, ठीक है." It's fine, right? You don't think about it on an everyday basis because it's a part of you, right? So, like, you would not think you have two hands. That way, you would not think you don't have two eyes, like you don't have sight in those eyes. So that's one thing that you don't think about it every day, every minute, saying, "Oh, I'm blind," right? "Oh, I can't see." That's not a narrative you live with because it's your life, right?
Yeah,
Um, but you find hacks to live, right? So when I got married 3 years ago and I moved to Delhi NCR, the society that we lived in, housing society, the lifts had touchscreens, which meant that a super independent person like me could not go up and down her own housing apartment independently because there was only touchscreen panel, right? So there are barriers in the world that keep reminding you that you have a disability and you have to find hacks around, right? So I think there are multiple reminders. Um, but also in a way that this is a barrier and what can we do about it, right? And it is frustrating. It's not easy that you moved into but you also have to then go and look for a condominium or a housing society, which, so, if people had 10 choices to move into a housing society, I may have three because the rest have now, in the name of advancement of technology, made everything inaccessible. While technology is an
yeah,
enabler, people have made it inaccessible. So I have three options to move if I wanted to find a flat, right? So it is frustrating in many ways, but because of the barriers more so, right? Sometimes when I'm super tired and I have three travels or six travels in that month, and I'm packing and unpacking, and I need to, find something, and it's taking me longer. There are those times when you're frustrated, when you want to really read a document and it's not being possible, and your technology is not supporting you, and it's a hard copy, right? I think I'm most annoyed when people can just scribble notes. They've not prepared their presentation and they're like just taking a piece of paper and scribbling and taking it to the podium and speaking. I'm like, hmm, it's so easy to do this.
so
Sometimes,
not fair.
yeah. So my laptop becomes a statement, right? I also take my laptop to the podium and I speak, etc. But people notice, they're like, "Acha, ye to type kar rahi hai." But like scribbling becomes a normal thing, right? So sometimes when it stands out, it's this, but I want to say that it's a lot of fun. It's so many things are a lot of fun when you live with a disability. My screen's always off on my laptop, right? Because I'm like, I want full privacy. I can't see your screen. You don't get to see my screen, right? And I can quickly send off an email while others are chatting about something else. And while it's a heavy thing to confess here, I still want to say that I do that because others do it as well. But because you're sighted, it becomes easier to quickly send a WhatsApp in the middle of a critical meeting and people won't notice, or, it can be done in a way. And I'm like, so my screen goes off and you don't know what I'm really doing. So, yeah.
Is it easy to learn to type and things like that? I just want to know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So,
Hmm.
I mean, not just with blindness, of course, there are screen reader softwares. So technology has brought us a long way, right? You of course have to learn to use the screen reader, but it's a software that literally reads the screen, right? Like you can see the screen, we read the screen. So if I'm pressing the right keystrokes, which I've learned, it'll say that XYZ first out of 25 files on your desktop. So I can go to the desktop, everything on the laptop, phone, etc. And there are so many apps that have been developed. Now, I do want to talk about one which I really enjoy using. But before that, so there are inbuilt softwares in most of our phones now, which you can turn on to use the voiceovers, which means that you touch the screen and it speaks where you're touching. You can type through that, etc., etc. One of the cool softwares that I use and I want to say because I'm talking about many hilarious instances in life. It's called Be My Eyes, right? and it's a life changing. Like people who are tech geeks love using the AI apps, and Be My Eyes is a volunteer app, right? So as a non-disabled or a sighted person, you can sign up to that app, and yeah, you can sign up, and then you will get a little notification if I say connect with a volunteer in my app, and you've registered as a volunteer. You can connect, and then I can show you. So it maintains privacy. It doesn't switch on my front camera. I can show you what I'm looking for. And it's been so amazing because I think I'd gone to one of the vineyards and bought bottles of wines, and I wanted to gift it to folks, right? And I
Yeah.
switched on, and there was a man. I think from the accent, I thought it was Middle East. Um, and I said, "Can you read the label for me?" Because I'd bought different ones for different people, right? Including for me and my partner. I'd got another one, and I was like, "Can you read the labels for me?" And he started reading, and he realized it was wine, and he's like, "Is this alcohol?" I said, "Yeah." He's disconnected the helpline on my face. And I fell down laughing because I was like, oh my God, like you can help me, but not to read an alcohol bottle because it's apparently not okay for a woman, disabled person, or whoever else to be using, like consuming alcohol. And so, that happened. But one day also, I'm really scared of, I'm scared, phobic of animals or pets. And I was entering a room where I thought there were cats. And so I switched on and I said, "Can you see a cat?" And the person was super helpful. And they were like, "I'm so sorry. There is no cat. I'm so sorry that you lost your cat." And I was smiling and I was like, "It's not my cat. And I don't want it to be here. I just want to sit in this
That's quite a leap they took. Yeah.
room." So I think you can use it for so many and such beautiful human interactions on these platforms. So I think just being blind also gives you the opportunity to have so many experiences that you wouldn't as a non-disabled person.
Yeah, that's very interesting, really. The richness that it's brought you, no?
Yeah.
Yeah. Also in your book, again, coming back to that, my favorite story so far is Rapunzel. I've read almost the entire thing
Mm-hmm.
and I'm really, really enjoying it.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow Rapunzel was my favorite because, the girl is so spunky. And we don't imagine Rapunzel in a wheelchair, but yes, obviously, I mean, she's stuck in a tower. She can't come down, so, and and when the prince comes to take her, literally rescue her, and she goes a little bit out of her tower, and she says that, the road is too bumpy, and he says that I'll carry you. And she says, no, I don't want to be carried. I'm independent. I want to go in my wheelchair. That is so nice.
That's
And
true.
yeah, and then he makes accessible roads for her. And he says that, I never met anybody on a wheelchair. I never needed to. And once the road is ready, there are so many people on wheelchairs who come out.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And this is what we wanted to do from the book, right? If you see, And They Lived Ever After is really, um, of course, an anthology of 13 stories by 13 women living across disabilities. What's been super rich is to bring disability into the stories, into fairy tales, but also claiming the power, right? Reclaiming your agency, reclaiming your voice, expressing your choices, decisions, etc. And I think the book does all of these, or finding community, right? So, in whichever way, actually, if you see the book is, of course, it's emotional, you can resonate with it because it speaks about isolation, about being different, about getting bullied, and so on and so forth at so many levels that I think each of us can relate with the book. While it's, about women with disabilities reclaiming fairy tales, it's really a human experience that all of us connect with. But what it does towards the end of each story is it hands it women there or the disabled characters there take back the power, right? Take charge of their lives.
Yeah.
Um, and that is the most crucial for each of us to have that kind of narration in different spaces, that how in multiple contexts, experiences, we take back the power. Whereas in the main, like the original fairy tales, it's like, oh, this person was handed over to this one, or like they came together and then life took over or whatever, right? But here, people are taking over what happens in life. Um, or taking charge of their own life, and I think that's really important. It also, each of our stories brings these kinds of moments, right? When you said the prince wanted to carry her, she says no, right? um People be like, but so romantic, he wanted to carry her, why would
Yeah.
she say no? And I'm like, but because romance is romance. How do you know she didn't let him carry her otherwise? Right? If he wanted to carry her romantically, I think she would have said yes, not for
Yeah,
accessibility,
exactly.
perhaps,
Not to help
right?
her, rescue her. Huh.
Not for accessibility, perhaps, right? So, but it's really, of course, because there are word limits and there are stories that need to be of a particular length. But this is also another issue, and each of our stories brings out such issues. Um, in multiple ways, right? This is just one instance, even from Rapunzel. And
Yeah,
there are
of
so
course.
many such instances in each of the stories where you're thinking, saying, oh, but we never looked at it this way. Right? And we often think that once a disabled woman has someone to take care of her, then her life is sorted. So, just referring to the story that you said, also, someone would imagine that a prince would be enough because he can then take care of her. Right? And so, this is
Yeah.
right. But challenging so many things just with that one instance is beautiful. And then when, saying that I haven't seen, because most of the times the invisibility of people with disabilities, and particularly women, the narrative is, but we don't see you enough to create anything for you, right? And it's really like a vicious circle. You don't see us enough because you don't remove the barriers. Um, and the more the barriers, the more invisibility happens, and the more we are not seen, the more it could be go invisible in policies, plans, actions, programs, decisions, etc. So yeah.
Cinderella's sister, like you said, you don't look at it that way, like the prince is quite a jerk. He doesn't remember what she looked like. I mean, he has to go with a shoe that fits, it's so tongue in cheek, I loved it. And how you said the Cinderella's sister is also quite oppressed by her mother, the Cinderella stepmother. It's very interesting.
So when I said that people take back the power, right? And one of the lines in the Cinderella sister, I've also rewritten Cinderella, but what Samrita has also written has been so amazing for me
It's really
in
fun,
terms of,
makes you think.
yeah. But also she says that so many women in history are unnamed, right? It raises a larger gender question, saying why do we always call her Cinderella's sister? Why do we not know her name? Why do we not know the characters, the women's names, right? Why do we simplify, and why is there always a woman that's evil in a story, right? And we raise these questions about disabled people as well, saying, how do we bring humor in our popular tales, right? If you look at cinema, for the longest time, the humor was stammer, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Or someone who had a lower grasping power or intellectual capacity.
right.
They were the sources of humor all the time, right? Even today, we have, as recent as the last 5 years, 6 years, we have humor through people who cannot speak, right? So there's continuous
Yeah,
disabilities made into a humor. Or we have these long, whatever tales where the villain has an eye patch, or, someone who's stooped, or someone who has facial scars. They are the people who pose challenges, threats, fear. And that's what happened in fairy tales as well. They were only the villain or the wicked witch, or whatever else it was. They didn't have a name, they didn't have an identity, they didn't have a story, they didn't have a place, and they were never positive. They were never just human beings in that story. So this is what we are bringing through the collection.
yeah. And what you're saying about Bollywood, and you've also said in one of your acts, like it's just Budi Ma Andi Behan, you know?
Sorry, Amitabh ji.
Yeah, it's like constant theme.
Yeah, but we still grow up with this. The minute you have, auntie Ben or like any disability, you're like, Are, this person is totally, now this family is totally burdened. So we have these kinds of conversations instead of empowering people. And of course, we don't have that kind of social security support in the country. And of course, families get burdened. I don't want to absolutely say that the cost of living does not increase for a family. Those are really, really critical issues, right? We need to put systems in place, but it's not the lack of systemic support, the lack of a barrier free environment cannot be shifted to a disabled person and said, your disability is causing this. It's really the systemic lack. It's the ecosystem lack. It's not really the disabled person.
Yeah, that's true. And all these stories that I'm reading, they're so interesting. This ugly duckling who's actually a swan. There's nothing wrong with the duckling, this they're all trying to make them fit, and it's so sweet, he's so anxious. The first one which I read, I mean, he's so anxious. He's like literally withdrawing him to himself, making him smaller and smaller, until he finds his tribe,
Yeah,
or she, I don't know, but it's just lovely. And
yeah,
even the deaf Snow White, and she's constantly
yeah.
thinking, so they're all talking about me until the dwarfs say that, let's all learn sign language together. It's so
Right,
beautiful. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, that the stories bring out so many, like in small, big ways, so many things that we need to shift or reflect on together, right? So it brings these stories that we can connect with. So when you say the ugly duckling is feeling out of place, is feeling anxious, and then learns later that they really belong, but maybe not to the place where they were living, right? Many of us go through this experience, regardless of disability, right? In different points in life,
Yeah.
we feel like this. And so while it connects at a human level, or this Cinderella sister piece that you mentioned, saying, where are the women named in history, right? What happens to the woman? How do we look at a man who maybe has riches but doesn't even recognize it, right? So it's resonating with us as human experiences, as experiences that women have, but it also challenges our thought processes or shifts the mindsets in this way that Rapunzel did, or the Death Snow White does, or many other stories do, right? It just brings out this beauty of, oh, okay, yeah, we never thought that a deaf person, even if they know sign language, if we don't know, they might feel left out, right? How many
Yeah.
people think about it, right? We don't really think about it, and so it becomes uh, it makes us reflect in a non-preachy way,
Yeah, absolutely.
but
It's very
also
non-preachy. Mm.
but also very immersive, right? Where we have developed compassion or empathy or connection with this character, and so it helps us further see what their life challenges are and how we could shift by shifting our own
It's
selves.
absolutely non-preachy because with Cinderella, all I can think of is that these two girls just went to have a good time at a party, and then one of them is saddled with this awful prince who didn't even remember her face. I mean, how
Oh,
awful is that? And another thing, in your okay, before that, I just want to know that, this obviously you said this entire workshop, everything happened during the pandemic, right?
mm.
And why fairy tales?
So, okay. So why fairy tale, right? It's very interesting because we could take any popular genre. We could just say popular tales, right? And we went back. Like I was thinking, saying, how do we go back and forth? How do we, popular tales means can be anything, right? And when we see the fairy tales have been such an important part of our lives when we grow up, right? We always say, and they live happily ever after. Like
Yeah,
every child has been taught this, right? Like there is no other
yeah,
alternative. And it is simplified, the journeys are simplified, everything is simplified. And from then, somewhere we grow up saying there is a happily ever after. I'm not saying there is not, but I'm trying to say that that starts shaping our thought or subconsciously influencing us. And for disabled children, very often, because the fairy tales are a lot, many of them are about finding your prince, or family, and having this happily ever after. And for many, many disabled young people, you think only like non-disabled people ascribe or look at fairy tales to build their own narratives? No, disabled people as well. And they are lost because invisibility is taken to another level. where you're bringing human experiences through stories, right? So this is again a non-preachy environment when you think about fairy tales in general. They are just stories. And in all of these stories, which end very beautifully, we are invisible. We're just not there, which speaks about things that are larger than life, about beauty, about, magic, about love, about everything. And disabled individuals grow up with this thought saying all of this, the magic, the beauty, the love, the friendships, all of this is not for us. And I think so this was, you know, from the time we did a very, very small project or a small brief workshop as a testing, even like as a pilot, even before we did this long drawn process. But with that pilot, it was even more sure in my head that this is something that needs to come out. And that's how then the team and all of us worked together to make this a reality. It takes a while, right? The writing takes a while, the workshop takes a while, the reflections take a while. And it was beautiful because you'll hear feedback from our writers, and they said that that's what held them together in the COVID time, having a community, having a space to reflect, thinking like they're not alone, um, and really investing themselves in writing. So it started then. Um, we had a fantastic award-winning writer take us through the workshop, Aditi. Then we had a editor who worked with them closely, Richa again, really an author, etc. And of course, we had our team hold it together, and Rising Flame and my colleague, Srinidhi, really held it together with all her love and passion. So, I mean, with from the concept to the execution, and HarperCollins, really grateful that they recognized the potential of these stories, and treated it with a lot of love, care, and sensitivity. So I think it's been a fantastic journey with our commissioning editor, Shohini Prerna, who then worked with us on the editing. So our editor, Prerna, and then now Naya. So really the team coming together. It's not a one person's job. It really started as a concept in through the community's experiences, in my head and my heart, and it turned into a beautiful book with an entire team putting their hearts and souls together for this.
Yeah, tell me, Nidhi, who is this book for? Who's your ideal audience for this? Because I can see children reading it. I'm enjoying it, so who is?
So we would actually say young adults, um, but we also say that this book is for everyone for all the reasons that I shared, that it relates with everyone at a human level, right? It's not as people imagine fairy tales are for children, but this book is not just for children. It is our primary audience would be young adults, but um, we were very, very sure when the book was taking shape that we will define an audience because we've been told that that's something that we should definitely do. But also at the young adult age for disabled and non-disabled people, it is really the age where where you're more impressionable, where you're thinking about the larger questions, where you're shaping up into a responsible adult or a more supportive or a more coexisting adult, interdependence, like identifying all of that, um, building more closer relationships, being a part of community, having all of these journeys happen when you're a young adult, and shaping and influencing at that point through these stories or bringing these realities rather to the young adults is really would be really a big win.
Yeah, I feel like the sooner the better, I mean, as early as you can, get the message across because like you said in one of your talks again, and I read in the book as well, the Rapunzel one, where, they say that ask before you help. So I was and it's for everybody, so I was at the airport checking in, and I went to get my boarding pass, and this girl came very helpfully, and she said, you have it on your phone, you don't need a boarding pass. So I was like, I know, I still want it, you know. I mean, how can you assume that I don't know? Just, maybe because I look older and, you know, and I would not understand all this. And then when I was trying to type in my PNR, she's like, let me do it for you. I said, no, it's okay. So, and I was just thinking that, like I said, why, and I was just thinking that, if I need help, I will ask you, and then I remembered what you'd said about that friend of yours. And even in the book, there's somebody, whenever you see a blind person standing by the side of the road, anybody just takes their hand and takes them across. But they may not even want to go across the road because we're so uncomfortable with somebody just standing there. So,
Yeah, I also, again, these are all well-intentional things, but like intention things, but it's really interesting, right? Because you may want to help, but I may not need that help, right? I may take five
yeah.
minutes extra to do this, but I may want to do it, right? And it becomes very interesting because people are sometimes huffing and puffing and breathing loudly, and they're like getting impatient, and you're like, "Oh, chill, man. This is just yeah." But yeah, it lands you up into very interesting situations. I've also been misplaced at tables. I mean, I want to say I've again brought some of this experience in a different way in the story. Um, I won't share what's in the story, but
Yeah,
there have
yeah.
been
I know
instances
which
where
part you're talking
actually,
about. Yeah.
yeah, actually, when we were picking up, I was in a cab, and another friend of mine from the community who was also blind we were picking up two of them, or one of them, I can't remember, right? But like one of them, I think we were picking up, and I told the cabbie saying at the next signal, just cross and stand, and you'll see a man with a white cane there, right? And I'm coordinating with my friend, and or I, and then we randomly picked up the wrong person because with another guy in a white cane waiting for someone else. And
Oh,
he shot. So I told him his name, right? Because white cane is a like blue shirt and white cane becomes like an identifying
yeah,
thing what
yeah.
you're wearing, right? So you would say things like that, right? So I had said saying this color shirt and also has a cane in his hand, like I have, right? And I said when he was getting down, saying, check with him if his name is so and so. And he, of course, didn't do that. He just brought the man and put him in my taxi. And I was like, hi. And this person said hi. And I was like, sorry, who are you? Get out. um, yeah, he didn't think that there could be two blind men waiting at the street for two different people.
The
So I
first blind
think,
man he saw, he just brought him in.
yeah, so I think, or I've been put at wrong tables in a restaurant. It's just, I cannot explain how funny it gets at times. Of course, it's annoying as well. Helping without, and I say this very often around food plates at conferences, at meetings, etc., etc., where I'm trying to say I just need these two things, and people are like, "Don't worry, I'll make your plate and get." And I'm like, "But I am worried. I don't want to waste all that food, and I don't want you to crowd my plate." But people are like, "Hey, you sit down, I'll get food for you," and they're being super helpful, right? But and sometimes it's so exasperated. I'm so exasperated because I'm like, no, can you just listen? Can you just give it 1 second of listening to, like, I don't want to eat this and I want to eat this. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like that's in the Rapunzel story. They put up a sign over there. Ask before helping, right? Something like that. Yeah. So
Sorry.
Nidhi, yeah, so I could talk to you forever. There's just so many things. But we have to end, I guess, now.
Yeah.
So tell me, what's next for you for Rising Flame and even plans for the book?
So, we're really excited that the book is out and we've published with HarperCollins, and these amazing 13 stories are out there in the world. The plans for the book are really to reach as many people as we can in colleges, to students, through bookstores, to people, through online media, etc. Um, because we feel the power of the stories will really only be translated when people engage with the stories, right? For us, this was a big win, a big step forward. But the biggest win will be when people are engaging with the stories, and this shifts their mindsets, their attitudes, their actions and behaviors. And so it's really that. Um, and with Rising Flame, this was a beautiful way to end what's called in India the financial year. before March 31st, but it is also, it'll also be followed by some more exciting publications, more in-house. We will continue our programs, the twofold work that we do, right? We will continue to directly work and build capacities of women, youth, and persons with disabilities, but also our second strategy and our focus, where we will keep influencing the ecosystem. So, actors were around us, ranging from doctors, health professionals, policymakers, and so on and so forth, really, so that we together can build a world that's inclusive and we all commit together, just with a few steps or simple shifts in behaviors and actions that we can do to make this world a more welcoming, empathetic, and inclusive space for everyone, not just for persons with disabilities, but all of them living with diversity. Inclusion is what we will aim at and what we will work towards.
Yeah, thank you, Nidhi. It's wonderful and all more power to you. And for, shifting mindsets, even mine. So I'm going to look at things a lot differently from now on. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure being here. Thank you so much for taking out all this time and talking to me.
No, it's completely my pleasure. Yeah.